When was the last time you thought about the people on the street? The background characters that fill out your life. Who they are, why they're there, what brought them to be standing there behind you in line or making your coffee or any of the other billion little actions they do every day that flush out the world you live in. I've always been partial to thinking about that myself. Not that I people watch as a hobby or anything, but more that I have a bias towards thinking about such things when I interact with others. To be wholly honest, one of my deepest fears is a result of that bias, but that's a topic we need not get into. Having said that, since August of last year, I have been working a job that has fostered that bias and raised it to new heights in me. Day in, day out, I have been one of those background characters to thousands and thousands and thousands of people. I've had the privilege, torture, unique experience of playing one specific and recurring role in neighborhoods throughout the Bay Area. It has been an interesting and deeply impactful experience, and now I would like to share it with you. So strap in for a moment as we depart from our irregularly scheduled eldritch horror and linguistics, and get a look into the world of canvassing. Allow me to set the stage for you. I am a recent college graduate, having just returned home to live with family and ready to get out into the real world. In many ways, I'm still recovering from the last quarter of my final year. There's probably some residual burnout from exam season. There's also an immediate pressure on me to get a job, and I have family members breathing down my neck to hurry up and making comments about how they had a job right out of college. I try to inform them that this isn't the 1690s anymore, and that the basic qualifications to get a job have significantly changed since their advice was relevant. I tell them that making snide comments about me getting a job won't help me get a job any faster, and that while I certainly welcome constructive assistance like help with my resume, sifting through job posts on sites, or writing cover letters, just telling me to get a job will only serve to waste oxygen and time that I could have spent finally figuring out how magnets work. I'm sure that to many millennials and older members of Gen Z, this should be an all too familiar experience. The job market isn't exactly stellar for recent graduates, and I know people with advanced degrees who are struggling to get a job. So it should come as no surprise that one day, while I was at an event, I saw a young man in a purple polo shirt raising money for Having nothing better to do, I strike up a conversation and ask how he got his job. He tells me, and he says that they're always hiring, and what the hell, I think, I might as well apply. A month or so later, I get an email saying that I could come to orientation and begin training and interviews for the job. I make it through and get offered the position. The people I met in the office were pretty nice, and if you can't guess, I'm actually not terrible at public-facing work. If you ask anyone who knows me, they'll probably tell you that I'm very talkative, and I can hold conversations for hours if I'm feeling up to it. And I find that people like talking to me as well. So initially, I took well to the job and enjoyed it. But before I can go into further detail about my experiences, I should probably talk a bit about what canvassing is. Part 1. Do I need titles? For those who live in a world utterly devoid of unwanted human interaction and have thus never seen a canvasser, first, which exit on the I-5 is it? How's the nightlife? Please, tell me.
I want to go to there.
Second, a canvasser is a person whose job it is to start conversations with strangers about a specific topic, usually related to politics or charity. This can be done for a ton of reasons, but it's often related to outreach and education, political campaigns, and the one I did, membership drives and grassroots fundraising. If you ever see a kid with a vest outside of a supermarket trying to get signatures for a petition, that was probably a canvasser. Unfortunately, because of how diverse the space is, I can't really speak to the full spectrum of experiences or types of canvassing, and so will only speak to my experiences. However, I have asked for input from my coworkers and other canvassers I encounter in the wild, so I will try to reflect their experiences as best I can. I will also attempt to clarify or discredit some myths that might exist around canvassers too. Generally, canvassers fall into two groups: volunteer and paid. Most people typically make the assumption that canvassers are volunteers. In reality, I've met very few of those. Most canvassers I've met have been paid. This includes myself and my coworkers. For many of us, it was a full-time job. It's not the best job in the world, but it is a good job if you need flexibility and something to pay the bills while you're finding something better. Oftentimes, paid canvassers do not actually work for the organization they fundraise for directly, but rather they contract through a third party. The support industry for nonprofits and charities is much bigger than you'd expect, and oftentimes multiple charities will contract to the same third party. Charities and nonprofits contracting to third parties is a fairly normal thing, and all sorts of organizations do it, from the ACLU to the Special Olympics. Where I work, my employer has contracts with a few different organizations. There's multiple reasons why a nonprofit or charity might choose to contract to a canvassing firm. Among them, convenience. But one of the big ones is because it's one of the most efficient methods of raising money. Face-to-face canvassing can have an incredibly high return on investment. When I sign someone up, the return can be anywhere from 200 to 500% in some cases, which is significantly better than traditional advertising. Seriously, consider the last time you watched an ad or saw a billboard and even bothered to remember the product or look up what they were selling. Like many people under 40, I rarely, if ever, pay attention to traditional ads, and I have an ad blocker. It's a lot harder to ignore a person who says, "I want to talk to you about this good cause," than it is to ignore a billboard or a TV ad, which more easily fades into the background. Face-to-face canvassers are also just a good way of getting the word out about important things and answering questions. A lot of charities now rely on the support of canvassers to help them stay funded. People will occasionally ask me if I really am the best use of money, and the answer is yes. I can do everything a billboard can, and more. Given what I've just said, and the fact that I work in a city like San Francisco, you might assume that it's a pretty easy job. People must want to sign up and support an organization which does good work that they value. On one hand, I want to say yes. I like to joke that I'm paid my hourly wage plus tips, because people semi-regularly just give me stuff. I've gotten everything from money to alcohol to books they thought I'd like. No kidding, someone once invited me and my coworker to have a free wine tasting at her shop after our shift ended to thank us for the work we were doing. I don't pretend I'm a volunteer. I let people know very clearly that this is my job and that they don't need to give me things. But even knowing that, people will sometimes decide they want to give me something, even if they can't necessarily donate right now. And that's really cool. This job can show you some absolutely amazing sides to people, and I've had experiences that I would not have had otherwise if I hadn't taken it. I don't remember every person I've ever signed up, but I do remember a lot of them, and they're often really cool people. I remember the guy who signed up with me in Rockridge and who kept running into me at random locations every few months. I remember the linguist who had already heard of this channel and whose mother I gave advice about dealing with delayed sleep phase disorder. I remember the deaf woman I signed up by typing my entire pitch to her and who I bonded with over GameCube games and the fact that we didn't know if we were millennials or Gen Z. I remember this woman who, upon seeing that I was having a string of technical difficulties with my tablet, said, "Look, I can tell there's something up here, and I need to get lunch. Do you want to grab something to eat with me while we figure out what's wrong with your tablet?" Which was such a roller coaster of emotions for me that I almost dropped dead on the spot from whiplash. Beyond the people, I get to work outside in San Francisco. San Francisco may be derided by people who have no clue what they're fucking talking about, but the fact is that you'd be hard-pressed to find a more photogenic city in the US. Sometimes I'll just round a corner and realize that I'm at the top of a hill overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge, or I'll work a location with a fucking circle of light-up cats for some reason. Or I'll get to canvass a street fair put on by the leather and kink community. After a while, you become a background character in some of these places too, and the other background characters start to recognize you. They know your name and choose to talk with you about whatever they're thinking about at the moment. When it's good, this job is amazing. Having said that, the red flags were present from the very beginning. The first person I ever signed up did so because someone had decided it would be a good idea to harass the trainees. We call that a jerk assist, and while I'm grateful to the guy who stepped in and formed a wedge between us and the person yelling at us, I'm disturbed by the way people treat canvassers, often without realizing it. I wrote the first draft of this script a few months back after I had a really shitty week, during which I was called homophobic slurs, told that I was anti-life and hated humans because I was gay, had someone give me the middle finger, had someone yell at me out of a car, had someone tell me I should be ashamed of who I work for, and had someone tell me to go fuck myself. Those last three happened in the same day, and that's just the insults. I regularly get people who decide to try to start arguments with me about anything and everything. It's a uniquely horrible experience to have random middle-aged woman number 7 and generic balding white man number 6 approach you because they decided that you would be the person they told about their highly specific and aggressively misinformed conspiracy theory. And that's just a sliver of my experience. My trans coworkers have talked about people trying to start arguments with them or making transphobic comments, while my female coworkers have had people catcall them or say creepy things about them, or in some cases, just fucking touch them. One of my coworkers got a death threat the other week. We work in groups in well-lit, high-traffic, bougie neighborhoods, but that doesn't guarantee that people won't be assholes. The funny part is, though, it's not those extreme interactions that make this job miserable. It's the stuff that you, dear viewer, probably do without realizing it. Part 2. You're not in a rush. Addy, watch thy tongue, thou knowest that the ice beneath thy feet is thin. Attack not thy humble viewers, for it is by our will that thou hast an audience at all, and we might abandon thee for greener pastures shouldst thou stoke our ire. O viewer, You know I would never seek to invite your rage, but please permit me this one proclamation, for I am confident that you are also guilty of this crime too. You see, people, I think, suffer from a serious lack of sonder. They don't consider that the others around them are part of their own complex lives, and as a weird result of this, people tend to lack a ton of introspection or critical thought. Sometimes people will behave in a way that can only be explained by the fact that they genuinely believe I stop existing after I exit their field of view. Allow me to explain. Unless a canvasser is moving from one location to another, chances are we're perfectly stationary. I tend to work on street corners right outside of specific businesses. What that means is that I probably have a clear line of sight up and down the street for at least a block in both directions. I see you approaching. I see you after you leave. You don't stop existing as far as I'm concerned once you leave my sight, and so I know that you're walking slower than a hobbled snail, and I know you're window shopping at every little business you see. I also see you stop at businesses after you leave me. If you're wondering why that's relevant, well, here's the thing. What do you say to canvassers when you don't want to stop for them? Chances are, it's some variant of, I'm in a rush, or I'm late. In fact, so many people say I'm in a rush that I make a little game of counting how many people say it in a row. Usually I get 2 or 3. Every once in a while I get to about 10. One time I got to more than 20. Most of these people are lying. And I know that they're lying because not only is there no way in hell that 20% of San Francisco is late to something at 3 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon, but also because I see you after you leave. I know that you started window shopping again, or decided to get in line at the expensive coffee shop, or stopped to take a photo. So no, you're probably not in a rush. You just don't want to stop. And yes, you probably should feel bad about that. Beyond hearing the exact same thing from every person, and before someone asks, I genuinely prefer it when people say no, not today, or not interested, because at least they're being direct and honest. People just avoid canvassers, and they will go to some pretty extreme lengths to do so. My favorite is when people walk into oncoming traffic to avoid me, because that is kind of funny. They're somehow failing the world's shittiest trolley problem.
Nice run!
But more often, people just speed up, which, like, fine, whatever. But you know we're not wild animals, right? It really makes you think about people more broadly. The people in a lot of these neighborhoods probably think of themselves as good, progress-minded citizens, but when given the opportunity to do more than voting, to put their money where their mouth is, they cower away. It really shows the messed up side of liberal politics, where all that really matters is the performative nature of things. Politics, to a lot of people, is a sport where, at the end of the day, you can wipe off the face paint, put away the foam fingers, pretend it doesn't actually matter. Part 3. I swear, it is not a scam. So I think a lot of people actually do have some valid fears when they see canvassers. In the mind of a lot of Americans, the idea of seeing someone on the street taking credit card information or names and birth dates definitely seems suspicious. But I can confirm to you that it's almost certainly above board when you encounter a canvasser. Like I said earlier, most canvassers are employed and contracted by a specific organization, and many of those orgs are pretty open about that fact. If you're ever curious, asking a canvasser which org they contract through and Googling that org can be a good way to confirm that it's legitimate. Many canvassers, at least in my job, work the same set of locations in a cycle, meaning that employees working those places can often recognize or vouch for us. Were it a scam, that likely wouldn't be the case. If you have any questions, you can also always ask the canvasser. Part of their job is to answer your questions and assuage your concerns. However, it should be noted that scams like that are also not really that common in the US. They might happen, but it's certainly not a realistic fear. In my research for this video, I haven't actually seen that much evidence for it happening on a widespread scale. And now that I've worked in the industry, I can confirm most of the canvassers I encounter when out and about are from legitimate and above-board organizations. I'd also advise you to avoid that paranoia about it being a scam, both for your own well-being and for the well-being of the canvassers. The idea that it's a scam and the lack of desire to talk with canvassers has resulted in some people risking injury while avoiding me. I joked earlier about people walking into oncoming traffic, but that's a real thing that does happen. No one has been hurt walking into traffic yet, but all it takes is one person not looking both ways for a slightly funny behavior to become a disaster. I've also seen people twist their ankles or trip because they ignored me. I try to warn people about tripping hazards, and I've seen plenty of people trip just because they didn't listen when I said watch your step. Where canvassers are concerned, people definitely use the fact that they think we're running a scam as an excuse to either ignore us when we need help or treat us like shit. If I had a nickel for every time some woman went Karen mode on me or a coworker for doing nothing wrong, I'd be able to buy a house in downtown SF. That sort of headspace can take a toll on the canvassers themselves, but it can also make it harder when the canvassers are being harassed. Part of the reason I remember the first guy I signed up so much was because he was kind enough to step in just to stop someone else from harassing me and my fellow trainees. But you'd be surprised how rare that sort of behavior is. Part 4. Conclusion. A few weeks ago, a woman asked me what it was like being a canvasser, and I was kind of stumped. It's a really hard job to explain. On one hand, it can be great. This job has let me meet people whom I genuinely adore, allowed me to reconnect with old friends that I thought I would never see, and gave me a chance to travel to events that would have cost me a ton of money had I not been working this job. When it's good, it's really good. There's nothing like the feeling of working outside and talking to cool people and getting to raise money for a good cause. On the other hand, the coldest winter I ever had was a summer in San Francisco. The time I got to work from Portland wasn't much better. I've had days where I've been soaked through, hypothermic, and gotten no one to sign up. So, is it a bad job? Hell no. It pays decently enough, my coworkers were mostly great, and even the office drama was entertaining. But it's also a hard job. It's definitely better suited for kids in their late teens to mid-20s. It can be a good experience, and it builds character well. In all, if you're considering taking a canvassing job and aren't terrible at talking to strangers, I'd encourage you to go for it. As to everyone else in the audience, you all really need to work on treating canvassers better. Just because we don't get paid on commission doesn't mean we don't have quotas. You signing up could be the difference between someone losing their job and going on to work for longer. And if that doesn't help, here's a dirty fact that will absolutely suck to know. Sometimes, when it's raining, my office has a policy of get to go home. So now you know that when you see that kid standing there in the cold or rain or snow, trying to get people to sign up for one cause or another, you signing up could mean they get to leave early. And hey, if you're ever out and about in SF, you might just get to sign up with your favorite YouTuber too.